everyone, Phoenix Knight here. Welcome to the channel, and welcome to Christmas in Arkham 2023. Wow, where has the year gone? It's time for us to gather once again for our yearly Christmas tradition. It's time for, if you're a regular on the channel, you know I'm not talking about mistletoe and reindeer. Well, maybe reindeer corpses. But it's time for the third annual Christmas in Arkham campaign. If you were here for the Summer of Lovecraft earlier this year, it's mostly the same campaign. The only difference here is we're going to use a very different game to determine the opponent for Christmas in Arkham. We used Pandemic Reign of Cthulhu to determine our opponent for the Summer of Lovecraft, and we ended up taking on Yig, along with winning the campaign 2-1. But again, we have a very different game and a very different way to decide the opponent in mind, so let's jump over and we'll get into this video. As you can see, I've prepared a whole PowerPoint presentation to walk you through this. So what are we going to talk about in this video? We're going to talk about what is Christmas in Arkham. Then I'm going to explain the rules of Christmas in Arkham. Then we're going to go through the ancient ones and how I'm going to sequence everything. Then we're going to recap everything and we'll do a video wrap-up. So first of all, we should answer the question of what is Christmas in Arkham? Christmas in Arkham is actually a twice-yearly campaign on the channel centering around the Arkham Horror Files, where I play through Eldritch Horror, Arkham Horror 2nd Edition, and Elder Sign as a mini-campaign. We'll get a little bit more into the rules of how that will factor in. These games are all from Fantasy Flight Studios, of course. The way we're going to determine our opponent this time during Christmas in Arkham is we're going to have a little tournament in a different game called Fate of the Elder Gods, where in that game you essentially switch sides and you're trying to summon the Ancient One. So the way the campaign is going to work is we're going to start out by trying to summon our opponent, then we're going to switch sides and try to banish our opponent. Fate of the Elder Gods comes from Greater Than Games. And it turns out that there are 9 Ancient Ones who actually cross all 4 games. We'll meet them a little bit later on in the video. So next up, let's talk a little bit about the specific rules to Christmas in Arkham for the Fate of the Elder Gods tournament. As I mentioned, there are 9 Ancient Ones that cross all 4 games, Fate of the Elder Gods and the 3 Arkham Horror Files games. We're going to split those Ancient Ones into 3 groups of 3. And then we'll have, essentially we'll do solo plays for each of those Ancient Ones of Fate of the Elder Gods. In terms of determining who advances, if only one Ancient One gets summoned, then that Ancient One will automatically advance. But if there are multiple or no summons, we'll have tiebreakers in place. If we have multiple Ancient Ones get summoned, tiebreakers will actually start with the fewest Elder Signs, then the fewest Curses, then we'll probably default to a die roll. Whoever rolls, say whichever Ancient One rolls higher, will advance. If there are no summons, then tiebreakers will start with furthest progress on the summoning track, then the above tiebreaker. So it'll be furthest progress on the summon track, then Elder Signs, then fewest Curses, then a die roll, in case we're still tied at that point. The winners from each group will then advance to a final winners group to do all of that again. They'll go through the same solo playthrough that they did earlier, but this time the stakes will be higher because the winner from the winners group will be our opponent for Christmas in Arkham. And of course, any questions you have about that, you can put them in the comments down below and I'll answer them. As far as getting into the campaign proper, the actual Arkham Horror Files games, if the investigators win Eldritch Horror or Arkham Horror 2nd Edition, they'll start the next game in the campaign with an extra item. And we'll roll for that at the start of the video. Whereas if the investigators lose, they'll actually start down 1 health and 1 sanity. If an investigator is eliminated during the game, they're out for the entire campaign. So say we get into a situation where, say Wilson Richards is one of our investigators. If he gets eliminated in Eldritch Horror, he's then out for Arkham Horror 2nd Edition and for Elder Sign. We'd have to replace him. If an elimination is specified during the final mystery in Eldritch Horror, then we will swap. Otherwise, we won't swap if we end up losing during the final mystery. We also won't swap investigators out if we tap out from the final mystery being unwinnable. As a common house rule, and I've mentioned this before on the channel, if we get to a point, and this is also true in our Saturday group, if we get to a point where the final mystery has been activated but we can't solve it because, say, only we have 1 or 2 mysteries left. We have only 1 or 2 mysteries solved, and we can't even get to the third mystery until we can't even get to the final mystery until we solve the last mystery. We usually just tap out at that point, so we'll probably use the same logic in the video. But if the elimination occurs during the final battle in Arkham Horror 2nd Edition, if the elimination is during the final battle in Arkham Horror 2nd Edition, we would swap the investigators, because at that point, the investigators are being eliminated during the final battle. So with that, let's go ahead and group the Ancient Ones. We'll actually meet the Ancient Ones who are eligible for the campaign this year. First up is our most recent Ancient One, as we have taken on Haster. Now, I didn't realize this until I was starting to compile my history with each Ancient One, but we actually have a fairly bloody history with the King in Yellow. I thought Nyarlathotep was the Ancient One that we had the bloodiest history with, but it's actually Haster, surprisingly. So, as far as our history with Haster, his most recent appearance on the channel was during the fall campaign in 2023 for Arkham Horror, the card game, where we actually lost to him in Dim Carcosa. During Christmas in Arkham 2022, he was in the first group and he was summoned, but he was eliminated in that first group. I think he took like 4 curses, I want to say. He was close to being eliminated from that first playthrough. When we debuted Fate of the Elder Gods earlier last year, we actually did manage to summon Haster. He was our Ancient One that we played during that game. During a playthrough of Cthulhu Death May Die, I believe last year as well, we played against him in Blasphemous Alchemy, and that was a complete disaster. Less said about that playthrough, the better. Then when we debuted Eldritch Horror for the very first time, we won that game with only 1 doom to spare. Let me check, make sure where I've got everything tabbed. Okay, that's going to tab there. We'll actually move into the way we're going to determine which Ancient One we're taking on. We've actually got a random wheel set up. Pardon the let me see if I can close that advertisement. So what we did last year is we actually used dice rolls to determine the sequence, the group, and the sequence for the Ancient Ones. When we got a little bit later in there, though, we actually had quite a few rolls that we had to go through, where we had to do multiple rolls. So I figure the wheel is going to be a lot easier. As you can see by the descriptions of what I've got over here, we've got each group in here and what sequence they're going in. So an Ancient One could end up in group 1, 2, or 3, going first, second, or third, but the wheel will tell us all of that. So let's give it a spin and see where Haster's going in the tournament. Haster is going to end up in the third group going first. Let me make a note of that in my spreadsheet. All right, we can remove group 3 going first from the list, and we'll go into our next. We'll tab back over to our PowerPoint presentation to go through our next Ancient One. We've also had a fairly recent history with Yig on the channel. During this year's Summer of Lovecraft, he emerged from Pandemic Reign of Cthulhu to be our opponent, where we managed to beat him 2-1 after stealing Eldritch Horror from Yig. Then we took care of business in Arkham 2nd Edition, and Elder Sign was just a complete disaster where we couldn't get anything going. In last year's Christmas in Arkham, the Fate of the Elder Gods tournament last year, he was one of only 2 Ancient Ones to not get summoned at all during the tournament. So let's move back over to our random wheel and we'll spin Yig up. I guess Yig's going to be out for revenge this time around because he is going to be leading off the entire tournament. He'll be in the first group and going first. So that should be an interesting challenge for Yig. Next Ancient One up, back into the presentation, is Shubni Gudath, the Black Goat of the Woods. She was our opponent last year in Christmas in Arkham after winning the Fate of the Elder Gods tournament and proceeding to get trounced during the campaign 3-0. I say getting trounced, but of course she fought us every step of the way. But let's move over to our wheel and see where the Black Goat of the Woods will be landing. The Black Goat of the Woods will be following Haster in the tournament. She'll be in Group 3 going second. I'll get this typed up. Typing over a yoga block is a little bit difficult, but manageable. We can remove that from the list. And our next ancient one up is Nyarlathotep. This was the previous ancient one that I've had a very bloody history with. During Christmas in Arkham 2022, Nyarlathotep was actually the other ancient one in the play-in groups to not get summoned. During the Summer of Lovecraft last year, though, he trounced us handily by a score of 3-0 that was even deceptively close. During the spring campaign in 2021, which is actually the very first campaign we ever played on the channel, when we did Dream Eaters, he took control of Lola and Harvey on the Dream side. And then during our Elder Sign campaign epilogue to that campaign, Nyarlathotep Act, we actually managed to rescue Lola and Harvey and then defeat Nyarlathotep. So we'll move over to the wheel once again, and we'll see where the Crawling Chaos is going in this tournament. Nyarlathotep will be capping off the second group. He'll be in group 2 going third. So we'll remove that from the list, and our next ancient one is actually the namesake of the Cthulhu mythos. Don't be deceived by the adorable picture. Cthulhu is a very dangerous adversary, as are all of the ancient ones. During Christmas in Arkham 2022, we did manage to summon Cthulhu, but he was eliminated via tiebreakers in the third group. As for Cthulhu Death May Die, one of our first playthroughs, we actually won Blasphemous Alchemy against Cthulhu by the skin of our teeth. I've talked before about Death May Die, with the modular setup of Ancient One and Scenario. They feel very different when you play the same scenario against different Ancient Ones, but that's not relevant to the question of Christmas in Arkham. This, however, is. So let's give the wheel a spin and see where Cthulhu's landing. Cthulhu will be closing off the first group, so he'll be in Group 1 going third. We've got most of Group 2 still to fill and a spot in Group 1 left. So we'll remove that from the result sheet, and we'll move into our next ancient one, who is Yog-Sothoth. We've not had much interaction with Yog-Sothoth on the channel. During Christmas in Arkham 2022, he won the first group and got to the winner's group, but he lost in the final group via tiebreakers to Shub-Niggurath. The Spring Campaign 2022 in Arkham Horror, the card game, was the Dunwich Legacy, and we actually ended up tapping out in that campaign early due to trauma. It was after that campaign where I introduced my house rule on trauma, where you can clear trauma. You can spend 4 experience per trauma you want to clear on your investigators during the campaign, or at the end of the campaign, you spend the lesser of 4 experience per or 10 experience to clear all. Actually, the greater of no. You would spend the lesser of 4 experience per or 10 total experience to clear your trauma. That's the rule we use. Back over to the wheel we go. We'll see where Yog-Sothoth lands in this year's tournament. Yog-Sothoth will be going very last in the tournament. He'll be in Group 3 going third, which means Group 3 has now been completely filled up. All right, we can remove that from the list. And we'll move over to our next ancient one, Ithaca. By an executive decision, Ithaca was our opponent for Christmas in Arkham 2021. We won that campaign 2-1, but lost Elder Sign Omens of Ice, when Ithaca woke up before we had enough Elder Signs to be able to fight him. And then in Christmas in Arkham 2022, he was summoned as well, but he was in the first group, but he lost to Yog-Sothoth via my executive tiebreaker, where I decided I was going to try to mix up the ancient ones I featured on the channel. So basically, the executive tiebreaker was just everything else is still tied, so I'm going to err on the side of an ancient one that I haven't featured on the channel in Yog-Sothoth versus one I had in Ithaca. So let's move over to our wheel and see where Ithaca is going. Ithaca looks like he's going to be in the middle of the second group. So our last 2 ancient ones. Oops, let me get to the right sheet here. Ithaca will be in Group 1, going second. I think this was where he was last year as well. No, he was in Group 1 last year, but he was going third in that group. So now we've got that figured out. We've got two. We can remove that result from the list. And we've got two Ancient Ones left. Both of them are going to be going in the, I believe it's in the second group, right? Yes. Both will be in the second group. I think both of these were also in the second group last year. Yes, they both were in the second group. Anyway, we'll just introduce both of the last two Ancient Ones, and then we'll spin the wheel for one of them. Azathoth is another Ancient One that we haven't had much history with. During Christmas in Arkham 2022, he was summoned in the second group, but eliminated there via tiebreakers to the eventual winner of that group. For the fall campaign in Arkham Horror, the card game, last year, we did return to the Circle Undone and managed to escape from Azathoth. As far as our last Ancient One, Atlach Naka, the Spider Queen, we've also had some recent history with Atlach Naka. During last year's Christmas in Arkham Fate of the Elder Gods tournament, Atlach Naka was actually the Ancient One who defeated Azathoth via tiebreakers, but she was the only Ancient One in the winner's group to not get summoned. As for the spring campaign in 2021, when we did Dream Eaters, Atlach Naka was the Ancient One on the Waking side, and Jenny and Ursula managed to defeat him. Also, in a collaboration with Jester, when we played Eldritch Horror earlier this year, as an exhibition playthrough, we did manage to defeat Atlach Naka. Hang on, I'm going to take a little drink here. Much better. Feeling my throat getting dry. So we're going to spin the wheel one more time for Azathoth, and then Atlach Naka will go in the other spot. So we know both Azathoth and Atlach Naka are going to be in Group 2. The only question is what order they're going in. Azathoth's spin of the wheel will tell us that. The wheel has spoken and said that Azathoth will be going second in the second group, whereas Atlach Naka will be going first. And I think this wasn't the same configuration. Atlach Naka is in the same place, but Azathoth was going third in the second group. So that's actually all of the Ancient Ones. Now we'll bring it back up top to wrap this video up. With that, we're all set to get into Christmas in Arkham next week over Thanksgiving. So we'll take a look at our groups. We'll move back over here. So we can see in Group 1, we'll have Yig, then Ithaca, then Cthulhu. Group 2 will feature Atlach Naka, then Azathoth, and then Nyarlathotep. Group 3 will feature Hastur, then Shub-Niggurath, then Yog-Sothoth. That won't be until next Wednesday, though, when we start that. We'll start that with the Fate of the Elder Gods tournament, and we'll continue that all through Thanksgiving weekend, culminating in the winners group on Thanksgiving Sunday. I also expect to have at least one bout in the Greatest Boxer tournament and Title Bout 2. As what's coming up immediately on the channel, later today, and this is going to be an afternoon upload, because it's also going to be dinner, Mystical Munchies will be featuring the entree out of the official Dungeons & Dragons Heroes Feast cookbook with the pan-fried knucklehead trout. And tomorrow, we're playing Ark Nova. Thank you for watching the video. Please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to turn on notifications so you get my content. Be well, stay safe, take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and I'll be back with more videos in the future. Until then, take care, everyone.